Welcome to the Modern Artrepreneur, a podcast documenting my circuitous approach to blending art and entrepreneurship. My name is Christopher Eaton. This season, you'll be listening in as I tackle 3 creative business projects of varying sizes and scopes. There will be some brainstorming, interviews, conference calls, and spreadsheet data. There will be gut decisions, emotional reactions, and more than a few all-nighters, all with the hopes of earning a living through capitalizing on my artistic endeavors. But before we dive into all that, I should give you a little backstory. Foothill Lane is an incredibly steep, narrow street in the hills of Santa Barbara, California. And when I say steep, I'm really not exaggerating here. I can't tell you the exact degrees, but compared to a protractor, we're talking easily over 30 degrees. As a child, the idea of skateboarding down the street was utterly insane. And as a teenager and a few tries, I confirmed that theory. And now, as an adult, I lose my breath just walking up the driveway. My family lived in the first house on the left going up the hill. Across the street from our back driveway, next to our clustered mailboxes, was a small dirt road that led to the neighbor's property, closed off with a wooden gate. It was right there, in front of that gate, that I established my first business. Can you guess it? Of course, it was lemonade. I built myself a little stand, a combination of TV trays held together with C-clamps and a hand-painted banner. My mom bought the lemonade from concentrate at the store, and then we mixed up a big, soury batch in our kitchen, and I sold cups to my neighbors for $1 apiece. Here's the thing. All the neighbors had to drive by our house to get home, which meant every family was a potential customer. So business was booming. Soon enough, I added pink lemonade and orange juice to my menu, and the line of cars stretched all the way to the bottom of the hill. It was delicious. The sugary taste of success. Let me tell you, it was really fun as a kid to exchange a cup of lemonade for a pile of dollar bills, or I guess $1 bill. But I remember racing home from school so that I could get to work and start making money. I started saving up for things. I started buying things. One spring day, after a long shift at the lemonade stand, I remember standing in my parents' kitchen, writing 6 frozen lemonades on my mother's grocery list, because in my eyes, it was all profit. Didn't cost me anything, so the business was on a skybound trajectory. I didn't get all of those lemonade cans, of course, because there were costs, and my parents were the ones paying for them, and I wasn't even cutting them in on my sales. Furthermore, you can't drink lemonade every day. It's the acid. It's too bitter. So the demand for lemonade faded away, but I didn't want the business to fail per se, so I did what many businesses do these days. I pivoted. Fine. If people don't want to buy my lemonade anymore, I'll sell them something else they'd want. So I wandered around my family property, brainstorming about what I could possibly sell to my neighbors to make a few extra bucks.
You came back home and somehow decided to paint rocks. And you painted them gold, and they had wonderful kind of Indianish symbols, very primitive, but they were also very fancy because you always had a bling thing. So they were always gold to start with, and then everything else went on top. And you went out by the mailboxes, and of course everybody who lived on the street had to go by you. It's a one-way, up and down. Okay, so they had to see you as though you were, undeniable in your attempt to stop traffic and sell gold rocks to our neighbors. And of course, all of them being delighted to see you always bought them. So that was horribly encouraging.
One day, I found myself playing on my father's planter boxes when it came to me. I could sell my dad's vegetables.
Went up and took all of our vegetables out of the vegetable garden and opened up your own farm stand, and we never had any for ourselves because everybody thought you were so darn cute.
So my prime business hours were between 3 and 5 p.m., when parents, most often mothers, would be bringing their children home from school. My father, an attorney, didn't get home until well after 5 p.m., so I had 2 solid hours of business before my dad would come home. So, unbeknownst to him, I dug up my dad's vegetables, washed them off with the hose, and sold them to my passing neighbors. My lemonade stand became a vegetable stand. And again, I made a killing. But that didn't last long either. One spring night, we received a call from a neighbor asking if we had any more carrots they could buy from us. My dad was pissed. Let's just say he taught me another thing or two about business. So I was forced to cut back on my operating hours, partly due to low vegetable supplies and partly due to being grounded and not allowed to leave the house. I had comic books, dinosaur action figures, my art supplies, and a CD radio. How was my business going to survive this parental embargo? So I pivoted. Again. This time, I went digital. In 1998, this would be my 7th grade year, my dad got a new desktop computer. At first, we set it up at the dining room table so we could plug it into the phone outlet so we could use our new dial-up modem to connect to something called the internet. I remember the first night we had that computer, I asked my dad if I could explore the internet and download a song or two. I wanted to get my hands on the most popular song of the month, maybe even song of the year. So, after searching the internet using Metacrawler, I located and downloaded the exact song I wanted. The Thong Song by Cisco.
Baby, move your butt. I think I'll sing it again. She had dumps like a thighs like what, all night long. Let me see that thong, baby. That thong. I like it when the beat goes. Baby, make your booty go.
It was right around this time that Napster first became popular, and I was definitely one of its early active users. I loved music, all kinds of music, so I downloaded tons of it. Another fascinating feature of Dad's new desktop computer was the CD burner. This technology was still relatively new, and at the time we were still buying cassettes and VHS tapes. But me, I had a CD burner. I made myself mixes with all my favorite songs on it, songs my friends were only hearing on the radio. One of my friends asked if I could make him a CD of a list of songs he gave me. Sure. $10. I saved up enough money to buy a tower of blank CDs and a packet of those printable CD templates. I would download all the songs from Napster, burn them to a CD, then make each person an individual custom CD design and label jacket, often with some very descriptive titles like Mad Ghetto Music Volume 4 or Pump Up Jams with a Z. I think I may have liked the art part more than the business part, but soon enough I was making 8 to 10 CDs per night, paid for in cold, hard lunch money. Sure, I guess you could say I was a pirate, and may have been the exact guy that Metallica was trying to stop. But, like a good boy, when the big bad lawsuit came and shut down Napster, I too hung up my music mogul dreams. Kinda. We'll come back to that later.
After that, you started painting clothes because you went to a school with uniforms. So
I have a confession. I'm a boarding school kid. I went to the Thatcher School in Ojai, California, but before you jump to conclusions, I didn't do anything wrong and I wasn't sent away by my parents. I wanted to go to Thatcher. It's a good school. My dad went there. Anyway, I was not the typical boarding student at Thatcher because my family lived right down the hill. To this day, my parents live a quarter of a mile from campus. This is important to note because all during high school, when school was out on holiday break, all my friends left and returned to whatever home they'd come from, the Bay Area mostly. But that left me with a handful of other local kids, mostly fac brats, children of teachers at Thatcher. And while these friends soon became some of my lifelong friends. When longer vacations came, they were just as eager to get out of town as everybody else.
So when you got home, you wanted to wear the wildest things you possibly could, and your brothers were in public school, and the pants were starting to drop, and the t-shirts were starting to be provocative, and you just decided that's cool. So you would write things down the side of the pants, or you would paint a jacket, or whatever, but that was really, fashion was your thing.
I spent many nights alone, downstairs in my bedroom, redefining fashion. It was during high school that I learned how to design and make stencils, so I spent nights cutting up soda boxes and spray painting on my t-shirts and jean pockets. I learned to sew and hem. Like I said, redefining fashion. I'd put on my new rag tags, set up the camera on my bookshelf, and snap a picture in my new hoodie or shirt. Sometimes I'd point at the camera, alluding to the chance there could be somebody else behind the lens. But most of the time, it's just the camera's timer and a lonely kid playing fashion designer.
I remember in college, you wanted to start a line of clothing, and you got together with some girl who was a fashion major, and you were going to make huge, I think they were herringbone or something, jeans that had lining in them that were wonderful. And I thought that was a great idea.
I came up with a logo and a name for my fashion line. Amalgam Clothing. But that didn't last long either.
I know exactly who you are. I know as far as you may go. But you're trying too hard, yeah, you're trying too hard, and it shows. I know exactly what you want.
In 2005, after spending a summer interning at Vagrant Records in Los Angeles, I started my own record label called KMD Music, named after my late brother Kevin Michael Dunn. The business plan was relatively simple. I set up a MySpace page for KMD Music. Yes, this is back in the MySpace days. Putting out a notice that we are compiling a compilation of unsigned artists with a percentage of proceeds going to a particular charity or cause. Our first album was Rock the Cure, a compilation to help fight AIDS. We wanted to sell it for $5.
It's not exactly who I was.
First, I recruited the help of my best friend Ward Sorrick. I then reached out to some of my high school buddies, spread out at various colleges and universities around the country, to be KMD Music street teamers.
You were so passionate about the street teamers and having people, reaching out to people that we knew at different colleges around the country. I think we Matt Stenovic, I think we probably sent some stickers to. I think we sent stickers to people around the country.
They would help me sell the album at their prospective schools, keeping a percentage of the gross sales. The more they sold, the more they made. We pitched the idea to a venture capitalist family member, and he gave us a check for $5,000. At the time, that was the largest check I'd ever held in my hands. At 20 years old, I felt like a real entrepreneur.
I think at that point in my life I was, thought I could be a businessman. I'm gonna do this, I can run a business, let's do this. Music is cool. I like my boy Chris. He's a creative, talented dude. I'm down to work with him on this crazy idea. Sure, fuck it, let's go for it.
So we were off. I set up a P.O. box, and we started to receive hundreds of demos a month, but we were mostly just gleaning artists who were submitting to us through our MySpace page. I employed the help of an artist friend who designed the album cover, while I designed the rest: merchandise, stickers, posters advertising the album. But it never sold big.
The college angle, thinking back to college, if we had sent that request out now, Chris and I are starting a music label, sending it to our 10 closest friends around the country saying, can you take time out of your day to promote do stickering and sell CDs and stuff, people would be like, yeah, I have a job and a family and things that I have to do now, so no, I don't have time for that. But in college, we just had so much, you have time to do that kind of help do that stuff. Really makes it, I got to start hitting up college kids to do work for us.
In retrospect, KMD's failure ultimately came down to, in my opinion, one extremely important decision: It was my decision. In 2005, when we were looking through the CD manufacturers and distributors that were in our limited price range, I narrowed it down to two options. One was a full-service manufacturer and distributor with an online store, and the other option was $475 more, but it included listing on this other brand new marketplace called iTunes. I decided to go with the cheaper option.
Oh no!
We printed 1,200 copies of Rock the Cure, and it was listed on a small digital storefront. I made arrangements with the band that I would send them the equivalent of their cut in the total gross of CDs, which ended up being close to 50 CDs per band. I think I sent a case to a couple of the street teamers too, but I'm fairly sure it was to no avail. I might have even made my fraternity pledges put up stickers and hawk the CDs, but in the end I couldn't tell you how many albums we actually sold. I think Ward's got a few boxes at his house still, and I have a half-empty case in my trunk right now. Nowadays, I just give them away.
I think as you get older, the things that you do teach you different things. When you look back, you take different lessons out of the things that you know. When I was 21, I don't know what it taught me. Now, with the whole other list of failures behind me, in addition to KMD, you know, and failure is such an interesting word too, because it wasn't, you know, it failed in some ways that it didn't exist still anymore, but it also was a success in a lot of ways, and at the end of the day, it was still worth our time, I think, and that to me is successful. And, you know, I think even in successful companies, there are failures. Like success doesn't exist if failure doesn't also exist.
I think KMD Music was really good experience for both of you. You figured out how to produce music, how to produce a CD. You learned how to market. You learned how to manage people and what to offer them and how to write a contract and all those things that you learned and you did for KMD Music just helped both of you immensely. You know, now you know how to do all that, and you knew how to do all that when you were 23.
During law school, I was doing a little graphic design to help pay the bills. Party advertisements, fundraiser invitations, startup logos, a billboard, that kind of thing. I was exploring branding and imagery. I was helping these companies, these people, craft a reputation that would hopefully bring them business. They wanted to use my art to build their brand. Why couldn't I do that? Why couldn't I start my own brand and start developing it? You know, like what we did for KMD Music, but for me? And one night, while I was working with phonetics for a random project, it came to me. The name for my brand.
So I come home from work. Long, grueling day in the Santa Rosa Plaza Mall at AT&T. Managing cell phone salespeople and dealing with Santa Rosa public and like people passing through who are having issues with their cell phones or like want to buy some new one or want to steal our phones, you know, sometimes. And Chris is lying on the couch, I think, on his laptop. Bombay. The cat is like nearby, just sitting around. And I go in the kitchen and Chris was like, Yo, Ward, like, dude, I have come up with it. Wait till you hear this, dude. Wait till you hear this. Like, just, are you ready? Are you ready? I was like, yeah, okay, what's up? Yep, lay it on me. He's like, Mystery Tin. Mystery Tin. What does it say? What is that? I was like, what? Mystery Tin? I don't even know. What's Mystery Tin? Mystery Tin. Like a... I thought about it, and I was like a little thing, like a little, you know, whatever, and you were like, yeah, and it's Mr. Eaton. Christopher Eaton. Mystery Tin. and was just like, oh, dude, what the fuck? I'm pretty sure we had like a explosion, and then Mystery Tin was founded.
Mystery tin. This mysterious tin that once you open it up, there's no telling what could come out. But perhaps, even better, when said slowly and with the emphasis on the right syllables, it delivers my name in a very formal way. Mr. Eaton. I ran it by a former advertising executive who's worked with multi-million, multinational brand campaigns. She said it was genius and had tons of potential. Well, that's great. Potential. Potential for what? I'm an author and a mixed media visual artist. I've sold lemonade and vegetables. I was a butcher's assistant. I sold framed artwork door to door, and I was a digital lab technician and a sorority dish boy. I've picked strawberries in Australia and made money legally gambling on the Olympics. I've coached youth and high school boys lacrosse. I've been a paralegal in a civil litigation law firm and the sales and marketing coordinator for a circus school. I've produced films and documentaries, sold graduation apparel and college rings, mowed lawns, and painted offices. But for some reason, I still couldn't figure out what my brand should be. Other than recognizing my name in it, I wasn't sure what most people would think when they heard the phrase Mystery Tin.
I think it's brilliant. I think what you're doing is wonderful. I think your search is wonderful for your place, for your niche, for your where it's going to hook you. And I love the fact that you try everything. That something will appeal to you and you won't let the little gnarly voice in the back talk you out of trying things. Because successful people try stuff that unsuccessful people are not willing to try. It's just that simple. I mean, that's so Dr. Phil. But it's really true, you know. They're willing to do stuff that unsuccessful people aren't willing to do. And that's you. You'll always have something you're going to try. And we always go to bed thinking it's just going to be another adventure tomorrow to see where you're head.
So that's how we found ourselves here. The Modern Artrepreneur, this podcast, will be focused on a few of my creative efforts in exploring and expanding the Mystery Tin brand. There will be art, there will be entrepreneurship, there will be interviews. Hopefully there will be some smart moves, and undoubtedly there will be some dumb ones. But this will be my honest attempt to document and share my creative process, which is an immensely creative process in itself. This season, I will work on 3 very different creative projects that I've regrettably been putting off for far too long. As an experiment, I will pair these projects with a different form of financing: crowdsourcing, online marketplace, and my own personal financing. The podcast will rotate focus with one project per episode, with an occasional retrospective episode, special interview, or quite frankly, anything that seems worthy of its own episode. My first project will be a card game. I've always been a fan of games and card games, so designing my own card game is an item high up on my bucket list. So I've been studying up on card games, playing card games, speaking to players and designers, and testing it out with, quite honestly, anyone that'll play with me or listen to what I have to say. So, will I come up with a fun, educational card game? Or just another failed campaign on Kickstarter? The Mystery Tin Podcast Network, which you're listening to right now, is another one of my passion projects. Before we go any further, yes, this does sound a little bit like the Startup Podcast by Gimlet Media. And I'm truly a fan of their work, and I believe they're leading the podcast world, but the idea for the Mystery Tin Podcast Network started far before that podcast was ever released and before I gave it a listen. Our approach is a little different. How is it different? You're gonna have to listen. And lastly, I'm working on an ebook. This isn't necessarily a unique, creative challenge or anything of great interest to a majority of listeners, but my real intent with this ebook project is to explore the viability of self-publishing for leading a sustainable existence while pursuing my other creative endeavors. Maybe you'll be inspired. Maybe you'll learn something new. Maybe you'll want to get involved with one of my projects because you can see I'm about to mess up everything. Who knows? That's all great, and in the end, that's what I want too. So this is the Modern Artrepreneur with Christopher Eaton on the Mystery Tin Podcast Network. Whoa! Nice work.